Good afternoon. My name is Rose Roscoe, and I'm here with my partner, Linda Daly today, both from the Special Ed Tech Center. And we come to you really excited today to offer a 4-part series on accessible content for all. And it's an introduction to accessible educational materials. And many of you have probably heard the acronym AIM. It used to be AIM for accessible instructional materials, and now they changed it to educational because it's including a lot of the technology resources that are out there today as well. So Linda and I are going to dig into this, and our goal is to make it a combination of us presenting some ideas, some examples of those ideas, and then time for you to explore some resources and do some sharing in small groups and large groups with us as well. So you see at the bottom of the screen, there's a tiny URL that has a handout of this PowerPoint. Even though it's a PDF, all the links should be live for you to go to. So you're welcome to type that in, tinyurl.com/AIM Series 2022. My name is Rose. Again, like I said, I'm an AT specialist and an occupational therapist by training. I've spent the last 4 years in the Bellevue School District as an AT specialist, and 31 years prior to that in Kent School District doing both OT and AT. We thought it would be fun to have a little some stories for you today. So this picture of me is with my son Christian, and he is a fairly new, I think it's his 4th year teaching. He started as a paraeducator, did the para to teaching program through Central, our very own Central, and he is now a fully certified teacher, and he has chosen special education, near and dear to my heart. So it's been really fun seeing him move through the development process. And this last year, he was placed in a classroom that had the more complex needs, intensive needs students. And he came to me and said, "Mom, I think I need you now." It's like all of a sudden, bing, he understood what assistive technology was all about and what OTs do. So we've had kind of a new birth of relationship, and I've been helping him in his classroom from time to time. It's been really fun. So that's my little intro story. And Linda, you want to talk about your picture?
Sure. This is my parents, Joe and Mary, and this was this summer, but the reason I have them pictured here is they are the first people who got me interested in assistive technology. My dad actually has dyslexia, and he's a medical doctor and went through medical school in the 60s when people didn't really know about assistive technology or AIM. But interestingly enough, he was given permission at Northwest University to tape record lectures. And also, I believe in his undergrad, he was given permission to tape record lectures and to be given tests verbally. So he was getting accommodations back before anybody knew about accommodations. And my mom was actually on the Pennsylvania first parent group to bring special education into the public schools. My youngest brother and sister both have special needs. And so my mom was on that governor's task force to bring it. So this has been something that has been a part of my life throughout my growing up years. So we thought it'd be fun to just put a picture of my parents with me on the screen.
But this is the question right now. How well do you implement accessibility into your practice? Does anyone want to unmic and talk about this? Okay, thank you. Whoever said, "I do not implement much accessibility. I need to learn about more accessible strategies." Excellent.
So I work for the Disabled Students Program at one of the community colleges. And so we have staff that do a review of accessibility for our students and accommodations, and also an office that does it for instructors when requested. But I am personally putting on a presentation for faculty in the upcoming weeks, and I want to make sure that my presentation is accessible if that is something that we're asking instructors to do, and also if there's useful information in this presentation that I could use to share with them. I would also like to do that as well.
Well, we are picking some little tips, a couple bite-sized pieces for today. So yes, there'll be something you can take away, and a lot more, of course, but we don't want to overwhelm us, one little piece at a time. Excellent. Okay, let's go back to our presentation. Thanks for your sharing, and we'll have much more opportunity for this later, but just kind of get an idea where you're all at. So here's our series. Linda, do you want to introduce that series?
Sure. So the series is based actually on a tip sheet that Rose primarily put together. We got to give some input, but I'm giving her the credit because she really did put this together. And it's the 8 tips to make curriculum content accessible. So we're going to be looking at the different tips on that. And so today we're giving really the introduction and giving a couple of tips. And then on the 28th, we're going to be talking specifically about providing access to text. And then on October 12th, we'll be looking at the closed captioning and multi-language support. And then on the 26th, we'll end it with just the whole implementation and how you implement this for all of your students and staff. So those are the 4 weeks of the series. Now, I do want to tell you that each one will be standalone. So if you miss one, don't worry about it. Or if you have a colleague you want to share it to, and we will be recording each one of them. And so even if they do just, get to 1 or 2 or 3, they can always go back and get the ones they missed. So.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So goals and objectives for the series.
Do you want me to go ahead?
Yeah, I can't. I think you're doing this part.
Yeah. Okay. So we are going to, the goal is that you will be able to identify 2 ways or more to make a document accessible to people of different abilities. And you're going to be able to, really compare and contrast the tools and the strategies so that you can find the best way to provide that access to text for all students. And then reflect on a way that you're going to be able to implement language support tools for students with hearing loss or multi-language learners. And then the other key piece we are hoping you will do is to specifically name 1 colleague that you can collaborate with to create an action plan for the accessibility in your district and school. So you'll start that step of building a team. But at least find 1 person that you can really collaborate with.
And note that these are objectives for the whole series.
Right.
We're not going to do all this today, but yes, we want to give you an overview of where we hope to go. Okay, so today's agenda for this session is we're going to dig into some definitions of what is accessibility and what are accessible educational materials. We're going to introduce that 8-tip sheet that Linda mentioned earlier and give you a visual on that. We're going to talk about some general accessibility guidelines, and I have 2 examples I'm going to dig into that hopefully can help. Is it Olga who shared earlier that you can take away right away? And then this is tip number 2 is communicating digital accessibility requirements. I'm going to give an example of that. And then we're going to give you some links that you can explore and digest in some individual time today. And then we're going to do some large group sharing around what you found or what questions you have. So we're going to definitely have some collaboration time, individual reflection and collaboration time in the second half. So let's jump into what is accessibility. So accessibility means that individuals with disabilities from early childhood through the workforce have equal access to materials and technologies for reaching educational outcomes and advancing in employment. And we found several really good definitions about this. We like this one because for our purposes, we are really looking at how do we help our students reach their educational outcomes, right? And our ultimate goal is that going to be employable, right? What is their vocation going to look like? So really thinking that the more we can give them access to accessible curriculum, accessible environments, all that now, that's going to transfer to the rest of their life. So now I think I'm going to have to stop for a minute and reshare. I'm going to try to show you this video. It's just we're super short to give you an idea because there's a lot more on this website you can explore on your own. So forgive me for a minute. I'm going to just reshare and make sure I've enabled my sound. Or I have. Now I'm going to go to this video.
Opening title, Access.
Okay, did you hear that okay, Linda?
Opening title, Accessible Learning Across the Lifespan. The audio description in this video is spoken by Kevin, a computer-generated voice. As this video begins, diverse students with sensory and physical impairments and cognitive differences
Are you guys hearing that okay and seeing it?
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to double check.
Use digital accessible technology in their classrooms and their homes.
Learners with and without disabilities have the same right to access educational materials and technologies from early childhood through post-secondary education and job training. But all too often, what's provided overlooks the variability in how learners with disabilities use materials and technologies, which can disrupt their independence, participation, and progress. This creates unnecessary barriers for millions of individuals and puts limits on the diversity of experiences and perspectives that lead to richer, more inclusive environments for everyone. The good news is that we can start today, right now, to make better decisions when choosing and creating educational materials and technologies. In a free video series offered by the National Center on Accessible Educational Materials at CAST, individuals who rely on and design for digital accessibility share their experiences and strategies. This video series will increase your understanding of how learners with disabilities use digital materials, and you'll learn about the wide range of accessibility features that are built into the technology we use every day. You'll begin to understand the relationship between accessibility and universal design for learning, and how you can advocate for making your workplace more accessible for everyone. These multi-purpose videos apply to K through 12, higher education, and job training. Use them for your own individual learning or in courses, training, and professional development. Let's broaden the conversation about accessible materials and technologies. Visit aem.cast.org to learn.
All right. So we are going to have a link to that, and one of the videos you saw that multiplex picture of like 12 individual people. It's a 10-minute video. It's the first one. We're going to give you a link to that too, and it's really good hearing from a bunch of different people with different disabilities and getting their perspective. So that's just kind of your teaser, but you will have time in the second half to go dig into that webpage and some of those videos in the series. But that would be a great place to start. CAST has done some great updates to their website in the last few years, and it's really awesome material. So this is another resource that we found, and it combines what is accessibility along with what is universal design. So I really like this graphic because it talks about all the different people that need access out there, represented by the hands. And then if you design one design up front or one lesson in the classroom up front that fits everyone, then it's going to be universally accessible. So it includes documents, websites, and media with captioning. So anytime you're doing video or websites or creating documents for a class, thinking about that accessibility. And really, when you're talking accessibility, specifically, you want to make sure that people with disabilities have access to the information and technology according to the law, right? They have that right. But universal design is really, if gen educators, if all of us are front loading and thinking ahead, that everyone could perceive, understand, engage, navigate, interact, regardless of ability or preference. So, you think about the curbs, where there's the dip in the curb for the wheelchair to get up on the curb. Well, someone with a stroller might need that too. I mean, there's a lot of uses for that. It's not just for someone only with a disability. So those two things are very closely related, and there's more info on that. I have a link at the bottom of the slides on where I got that webpage and information if you want to learn more. So now we'll just talk about AEM. Again, it stands for Accessible Educational Materials. And AEM really refers to, in your setting, whether you're in a school district or university or other setting, what are the content materials? They might be print, they might be technology-based materials, and what formats are they available in? And we're going to talk about 5 different formats to make sure you can have accessible to reach a variety of different people with disabilities. So we just want to, again, look at those technologies and make sure they're designed up front in a way that's accessible to a wide range of learners. So this is the beginning of our AIM webpage for SETC, and we started it for this class, and we'll hopefully continue to build on this, but I'm just going to show this to you really quick because it kind of Here's the video I talked about earlier. This is like a 10-minute video, but it's really good. I totally recommend watching this. That could be one of your activities that we do in the second half of the session. And there's our definition again. And then here's these 4 AIM or 5 AIM formats. Accessible digital text. So that versus, print, because a lot of times print isn't readable with the text reader, but digital is. Audio, like audiobooks, which many of you are familiar with. If you do have print materials and still textbooks, worksheets, make sure that they're available in large print to students that might need that because of vision disabilities or other. Braille might need to be something that's available for students that need that. And then Tactile Graphics is a new addition they just added to this. And that refers to things that you can feel that are graphic, like it's almost like 3D graphics. You make something and you have multiple layers and you can feel the shapes and the different parts of the media. So that's pretty cool. You can explore a little bit more about that as well. And then that's this 8-tip sheet. So this is just going to be kind of a launch page for you. And then we're going to continue to build this throughout the class. Okay. And finally, we're going to jump into the infamous 8-tip sheet. So this is just a screenshot. Today, session 1 will just be focusing on tips 1 and 2 out of the 8. So we're going to talk about general accessibility guidelines and communicating digital accessibility requirements. So let's take a look at the whole thing. This was created in a website called Bengage. So you can make kind of fun graphic materials. So these are 8 tips. With the goal of making curriculum content accessible for your students. And so for each of these tips, I just have a really brief overview of a few ideas. And today we are going to talk about meaningful hyperlinks and describing images with alt text and even looking at contrast or titling, in our documents. And then you can find more. This is another one of those links to the CAST website that has a lot more info on this. So a couple quick tips. Hit the link to learn more. Same thing here. This is talking again with your school districts and with vendors that provide these curriculum contents and making sure they realize what the law says around providing accessible materials. Some of them may have excuses on why they haven't been able to do it or can't do it, but in fact, it is the law. And then this link here gives you a lot more info on that. So Linda is going to be talking next time about number 3, 4, and 5, looking at print materials, read aloud books, digital books. And if you have print materials, how do you convert those to a digital format quickly for the students that need that? And then session 3, looking at closed captions for presentations and videos and learning more about that, as well as translation tools, how to use those. And then finally, like I said, final session, we'll get into how do you teach students about built-in accessibility features. So this is our 8 tips. This link is something that you can share with whoever you want. I think it's a great kind of starter resource for, okay, where do I start with accessibility? And I think these tips take you there. And this is the first time we've really dug into these in more detail in a class like we are today, with the hope that we can give you more time to really dig in. So I'm just going to put that 8 tips link right here. It's also in your handout, but that's it if you want to look at it again really quick. So the other interesting thing, I'm going to go back a page. Back to that web page. Notice here that I have 2 versions of this. So the infographic is the picture that you saw here. I'm calling this the accessible format, but what it really is kind of a plain text format, because we actually got feedback right away that there are people without disabilities that prefer a more linear format. And this is classic. We have the headings using the Microsoft headings feature. We have bullets in here. We have meaningful links, but it's just spaced and bulleted in a very plain text format without a lot of graphics and pictures. So that might be your preference. It might be your student's preference. Some of us, our eyes might gloss over with this kind of document, and we might prefer this kind. So I'm one of those. But we realize that you may need both of those accessible to people. So I just wanted to point that out. I forgot to mention that earlier. Okay, so let's get started with tip 1, the general accessibility guidelines. So here, I think this is the link I have in the tips document as well, but here's just a few quick tips. We're going to look at styles are used for section headings. So sometimes I kind of make up my own outline heading and I bold stuff or I enlarge document. But if you go into Microsoft, there's actually a set way to do that, and it's more accessible to people with vision disabilities. So we'll take a look at an example of that in a minute. Making sure our links are descriptive and meaningful. And guess what? There was a huge trend to say click here and then hyperlink the word here, or the words click here, or learn more, but it may not be descriptive of what you're going to. So someone with a disability may have no idea what they're clicking on, where they're going, unless you have actually typed that in there. Making sure images have text descriptions, and we'll talk about that. And then high contrast design, evaluations, holistic and authentic. So we're going to just take a look at a few of those, and I'm going to click on this too, so you can see what this document looks like. And again, CAST is your friend with all things AIM and accessibility. They have a beautiful web page here, and here's those 5 areas that I have highlighted on the slide. And they go into each one in more detail. And then it gives you some more things you can look at for examples and webinars and other things around accessibility. So I invite you to explore that later.
Rose?
Yes.
I don't mean to interrupt, but just for a second, I am putting the links in the chat. So if people want to look at the links as you're going through this, I'm trying to keep up with those and put each of the links in the chat so you guys can go ahead and pull those up. So
we're going to give you time to actually go out there and explore those links as well. So this is kind of a quick visual, but I'm about to get into a concrete example. And Linda, stop me if there's any questions in the chat, would you please?
I would. So far, I haven't seen any, so
okay,
you're doing great.
So I apologize. I know that the font is small on the right, but this is a picture of a document in Microsoft Word. And someone created this, and it looks pretty good, really. I mean, it's got nice readable text. It's got a bolded title there. Oops. Here's the infamous click here hyperlink. Here's another hyperlink that just shows you the URL in there. Okay. Not too bad. Pretty good. But in fact, what happens if you took this and did an accessibility check with Microsoft? What would you find out? How could you make this better? So think about you preparing documents for whatever purpose you have. Maybe you're a teacher of teachers and staff. Maybe you're providing something to students or some other venue. So here's your before and after. So on the left is what you just saw. And on the right, I've kind of boxed in red the changes. So this is the title and subtitles feature in Word. So when you're visually impaired, you can click tab and it will tab through the titles if you do them in this format. So that is the right format. This is that format. Notice this hyperlink says how to add alternative text to messages. So that's descriptive. Web AIM is descriptive. I know exactly where I'm going in my hyperlink. And same here, diagram center. So, and there's another heading. So you can see very explicitly with making a few small changes. Now this is accessible to someone with visual impairment, and they can be scanning it and listening to the titles really easily and knowing where they're about to link and go. So let me show you how you find those things here. So if you're in a Microsoft Word doc, you'll notice your ribbon at the top, and just on the home ribbon here, if you go to the far right, here's what you see: normal, heading 1, heading 2, title. I never knew what those meant before. In fact, if you use those when you're formatting a document, you can tab through them and you can access those really easily and navigate those when you have a visual impairment. So getting in the habit of using those is really helpful and will make your document more accessible. So that's practical tip number 1, super easy. Microsoft Word on the home ribbon. Look at these titling options, the styles there. Tip number 2 alt text. So I went into every picture in my PowerPoint and I right clicked on it, and then it would give me the option of putting in a description. So right here in that red circle below, this was a picture of the flyer I just showed you, and I just wrote a picture of a flyer about accessibility tips. So when someone with visual impairment hovered on my picture, they would hear that description. And so because they can't see it, it's really important for us to try to describe those pictures. And if you're putting together a PowerPoint, it's easy to do. It's a little tedious. I just, even today, I'm like, I made all these changes and I'm like, oh, I got to go back to make sure I've alt texted all those pictures, images, anything you do where you cut and paste an image in, you should do this too.
Rose, we do have a question, but I'm going to hold it until after you're done with this, because this kind of all goes together. Okay.
Okay. Yep. Okay. I'll pause after this second part. So in any document, whether it's a PowerPoint or Microsoft Word, you have this option where it says check accessibility. And I already forgot. Oh, yeah. You go to the review tab, and that's where you find check accessibility. And so what I do is I click on it, I choose check accessibility, the first option, and then this is what pops up, the square on the right. So it says, oh, I'm missing alternative text on 11 slides. Oh, I have hard to read text contrast. I should look at those slides and see like if I have enough contrast on the background color versus the color of the letters. Duplicate slide, suggested alternative text. So it tells you what to go in and look at. Then I go back in and check those. So this is really good. I looked in Google. Google has suggestions for accessibility, but it doesn't have an accessibility checker like Microsoft does. Linda, do you have anything to add about that? Do you know something I don't about Google accessibility, any kind of accessibility checker?
I will have to get back to you on that. It seems like recently I have seen something along that line, but I'm not remembering it off the top of my head.
Right. Well, I did some Googling on it, and I found like even on the Google, support, they have some good suggestions. Like they'll tell you some of these things, but they don't necessarily have a tool like this that looks for you and tells you what's changed. So I really do recommend, if you have access to Microsoft Office, to use that check accessibility feature. So those are my quick accessibility tips for just, there's a lot more, like I mentioned here, but just starting with a couple, alt text, the headings, and then this one, I just, in the last 2 years, I've been doing more of this descriptive links. And it's funny, I do a lot of co-presentations, and I'm teaching other people, oh, instead of click here, what if we described what it was? And everyone was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So what's the question? I'm happy to answer that question now.
The question is, if I'm a classroom teacher, does this mean I need to think about getting my classroom print materials into electronic format?
I think it's a role for everybody. And obviously classroom teachers have a lot on their plate. So if you have a student with a visual impairment specifically in your class that needs, like by law, this accessible format, you would work with the vision specialist, probably any other specialists that are supporting that classroom, maybe the special education teacher in your district, and they would help you. So like if it's something like Braille, or I need to order large print, you would work with your team on who's going to do that. So, on the more complicated kiddos, obviously you're going to have support. But in general, when you're designing lessons for your classroom, thinking about using PowerPoint and some of these accessibility tips, you do that for everyone in your class. You plan it that way up front. And then if you do end up having someone who really has to have it, it's built in. And we're finding more and more that when we design accessible up front, there's people that benefit from that, even if they don't have a so-called print disability or vision disability that makes it necessary by law. So it's a good practice, and it's a journey to learn how to do it all. So hopefully that helps.
Could I just add one thing?
Yeah.
We as SETC have been trying to do this for a couple of years now. And for myself, I found it was easier to start with one thing, like always trying to put alt text for all my images. And so when I first started, I did that so that everything I created, I would always put an alt text in, and then it became just routine that I did that. And then I would add, and then I kind of did alt text and headings at the same time, because those sort of seemed like what we needed the most. But I didn't try to take everything at once, because I wanted to make it become just a habit for me. And then I moved on to the next one or two things that I could add. And then I would do that accessibility checker, and that really helped. But it started to make it a habit to do that, as I just added one thing and then another. That was just for me how it helped. So.
Well, that's a perfect segue, Linda, because now we're going to have you reflect again. And it doesn't have to be these specific tips. It can even be something that you heard earlier in the presentation. But what is one tip you've heard that you want to implement right away, or maybe explore more right away? So if you want to either mute, if you want to speak it, type it in the Padlet or type it in the chat, that would be fabulous.
I think Bethany raised her hand.
Oh, okay. Let's see.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. So I think this is awesome, and I love to use Microsoft Word. And I definitely will try starting to use this more often. But what about if you compose your document in Word and then you save it or print it as a PDF? Do you lose some of those features like the alt text options? And is there any way to get that to transfer?
That's a good question. There are times when converting documents to PDF makes it inaccessible. However, I do know that there are some things that carry over, and I'll need to do more exploring on that, because I think it depends. It's best if it's probably in the full Microsoft format. Like, for instance, I made a bunch of materials for my past district in Bellevue, and I made them all in Word, and then I PDF'd them all before I posted them on our website. Well, that instantly made it not as accessible. But then you have to figure out how to lock it down. So it's a little bit of a dilemma. Same thing with PowerPoints. When you PDF a PowerPoint like I did, if some people really benefit from having the full accessibility features of the full-blown PowerPoint. Although PDF's gotten better, like you can access all my links and everything. So yes, that's an issue, definitely. Amy, okay. Is Amy, can you click on unmute yourself?
Hi, I just wanted to make sure I wasn't disrupting. I didn't see the option to mute myself, but I'm really excited about this series. I was listening while driving, and I just got home, and now I'm ready to click on all the links you shared. So
excellent, excellent. Amy, is this Amy Flesher Connolly?
Indeed. Hi, everyone.
Awesome. Glad you're here. I just wanted to make one other comment. Now that I'm looking at the chat and I see Dan is the one that asked the classroom teacher one. I'm going to give you some examples later where when you look at the classroom curriculum as a teacher, it might be available in multiple formats. You might have a printed book. You might have a website that the district gave you, and maybe you've got a bunch of stuff in Microsoft OneNote. So then you really have to look at all those formats to see how they're accessible. But yes, once it's digitized, there's many more options for making it accessible. So with that, I'm gonna, anyone else have a comment about any tips so far? All right, I'm gonna go through one more tip and then I wanna give you some explore time. So thank you. All right, so tip number 2, we're gonna dig into communicating digital accessibility requirements. So this is really part of doing that systems work, knowing who in the districts makes decisions about purchasing curriculum, who in the district, handles posting curriculum on a website somewhere or putting it in OneNote. Do they know what the law is around that? And then when you're purchasing, if you can get on a curriculum committee or on anywhere where they're making those decisions, a lot of vendors don't understand this either. So luckily in my assistive technology position, I've been able to talk to vendors about what our needs are for accessibility and ask them to make things more accessible, or that here's how we need it. I mean, in the old days, vendors, you know, we'd have a textbook and they say, here's a CD of that text for you. And guess what? It was a locked PDF, and it would not even work with the screen reader. Now they've improved that and they're getting smarter, but we had to go back to those vendors and say, you know, we won't buy this unless you give us a truly accessible format. So there's a whole guidance here, again, on the AEM website for how do you communicate this. And it's interesting because, again, they just converted how they talked about this, because it used to be the PALM initiative, which means purchasing accessible learning materials. But now they're saying, you know, it's both the responsibility of the school districts and the vendors. So it's not just all on the vendors. The districts have to make sure whatever they're providing in their own district is accessible. Like, for instance, putting things in a Google format or a OneNote format and posting it out there, you know, for classroom materials, Google Classroom, making sure that's accessible. And then also, if you bring in outside materials, communicating with those outside vendors. This is very detailed. I'm not going to go into this, but even, you know, if you are in a position where you can influence these decisions, it even has sample language for what are those digital accessibility requirements and how can I help my district communicate that to vendors. So there's lots of great materials here to dig into that, but it gets pretty technical. So we're not going to go into that. The main thing I want to say is, you know, hopefully if you're finding frustration on coming across curriculum that's not accessible, how can you be a part of that conversation with the right people in the district to go down that alley, make sure you do get more accessibility addressed directly. So here's kind of these two questions I think I already mentioned. Does your district or program communicate digital accessibility requirements as part of the curriculum adoption or procurement process? So sometimes they're looking at all the, like if you hear your district's doing a new math curriculum or a new, you know, elementary reading program, maybe you say, hey, have you thought about accessibility? And can I come to a meeting and talk about that? Because it may be totally off their radar. So you might be the one that brings it to someone's attention to really look at that. And then letting you know it's not a nicety, it's actually a federal law that education agencies and institutions are obligated to ensure that learners with disabilities can access the materials and technologies chosen for a curriculum. So the district has the responsibility and the vendor, and it's really that team effort. And you can help be an instigator of letting them know about these laws. So that's kind of the practical end. And now I like to share a tip as far as an example. So when I was in Bellevue, I tried to make an accessibility tool sheet for middle school and secondary, and they were using an Amplify program for middle school science. Okay, so I went out, I talked to the curriculum developers, and I said, can I get a link to that website and see what's in there and what accessibility is built into that website? So that's what I did. So we're looking now at an online curriculum on a website, and I found this. So I go out to Amplify and I said, oh, they had some built-in accessibility features already in there. Cool. They have a screen reader that's built in, keyboard navigation. Okay, this might be helpful. Is it really helpful? Let me try this out. Skipping the main content. So there's another practice. This might be helpful for someone with a visual impairment that needs to, have a quick tool for getting back to the main content or headings. Reading aloud for assessments. Okay, those are good tools, but they may not be comprehensive enough, but that's a good start. So okay, what's built in? So I'm going to go back to my slide. And I noted that these 4 things then are already built in. Good start. Make sure that I'm letting people in the district know, not only do you have Amplify, but did you know Amplify has these accessibility features already built in? Great. Good start. So here's the next thing I did. I said, okay, so we're looking at accessibility tools to access the science curriculum. And I'm like, all right, so we have the Amplify website. And I told you about that. There's the built-in screen reader. Now, there are some parts of it that wasn't going to be helpful with. And I found out that we had a WordQ5 tool that would float above a website, and I could select text anywhere on that web page and it would read in my third-party screen reader. This could be Snap and Read, it could be Word Q5, and I think Read and Write might have something like that. So depending what tool your district have, you know, start with the built-in, and you might need to add one other tool to access that website. So then I looked at a science OneNote that the district had put together. Lots of great content in there, but guess what? They wanted to put in, you find that they put in these PDFs and pictures that aren't accessible. So I'm encouraging them, whatever you put in the OneNote, make sure you paste it in as text so that it can be used with the immersive reader. And then Edge browser, all these things. So I have, here's what you can do with OneNote and just things that are in the Microsoft products. And then the third option might be, there might be some textbooks. There might still be some printed textbooks. There are quite a few out there. Maybe that the students need access to Bookshare so they can get, you know, a digital copy of that textbook that can be read aloud. So kind of walking through an example, think of a curriculum in your district, and then kind of walk through each of those areas of formats and see what do we have, what's built in, and what do we still need to make sure people know about to make sure it's accessible. So hopefully that gives you a little food for thought about how you dive into that. And of course, if I heard, you know, I was working in Bellevue still, and I heard that they were gonna, oh, we're gonna adopt a new science curriculum, I'd want to get in on that. And so I could check these accessibility features and find out if the tools we have would work with it, etc. So it's a really important thing. All right. So as it turns out, next time we are going to hopefully be in a meeting format, but today we're in a webinar format. So I'm going to give you a few minutes individually instead of doing this small group time because we can't do it this week. We are going to give you the option to either watch these two videos, one or two of them, or if you like to just go out and peruse website links, there's two great links where you can go learn more. And then we're going to come back together as a big group and share on these questions or anything else you have questions about. So pick something to explore, jot down your questions, and let's explore for about maybe about 8 minutes, and then we'll come back as a big group. Well, maybe 7 minutes. I'll do a 7-minute timer, and we'll hang out here. So I want you to go ahead and you know, you can mute us or whatever you need to do and go do your explore time. And then we'll be here in case anyone has any pressing questions in the meantime. So we'll come back at 4:24. So we have a few minutes to share. Okay, so maybe Linda, can you put that in the chat? Come back at 4:24. And then hopefully you guys were able to get the actual handout so you can click on these links. But we probably could go ahead and paste those in. I don't know. How about if you have trouble with the links, let us know. Otherwise, just click on the handout and go to this slide number and you should be able to get into these.
Sorry, Rose, I was actually answering a question in the chat. Did you say come back at 4:24?
Yeah, 4:20. Here, I'll put it in there. I'm in the chat. So hopefully, you know, I know sometimes if we take a break and keep talking, it can be distracting, but I do want to allow people to ask questions during the break. So if you need to just turn the volume down on us while you're exploring, feel free to turn the volume down on your speaker. And then we'll do large group again at 4:24. So Amy, if you want to unmute, you can talk to us if you'd rather do that than individual exploring.
Thanks, Rose. I know I'm going to explore all these things afterwards. So this feels like a great opportunity to respond to your example with Amplify.
Yeah.
I probably phrased my question poorly, but when I saw you presented all these built-in features, and I remember looking for that information a few years ago and couldn't find it. So maybe they've added some features. But I think the more complicated topic is how do we internally work with the materials, like putting it in OneNote. So I just want to follow up with you given your experience in a Microsoft district. That's not exactly what I wanted to chat about during this time, but I wanted to clarify my comments in the chat.
Yeah.
Can I share something that feels exciting about this
Yes,
topic?
absolutely. I'm
So
going to stop.
I'm going to
for a minute.
submit and I'm sorry.
I'm going to just pin you for a minute.
Okay.
Feel free to show your picture. We'll just chat for a minute. Until...
I don't see the option to, so you're stuck with my static picture. I just want to say that I'm applying to be part of CAS OER Academy, you know, Open Educational Resources.
Awesome.
And yeah, it's this collaboration with ISKME, the librarian group. And this is on the topic of partnering with people in your district who are making decisions. We're aiming to focus on the new comprehensive sexual education curriculum, which is an OER adopted by evaluated for alignment with Washington's new standards. And our goal is to create guides for teachers who are going to be taking this and then using it, remixing it. And the goal is to educate them how we can preserve accessibility or, you know, increase engagement. So it just seems really exciting and like the opportunity to have a pretty big impact across the state.
Yeah.
That's all.
Well,
so
I mean,
I'm kind of nerding out about
if
this.
you're on any project like that, I mean, so just, I end up hitting it off with the science curriculum developer.
Yeah.
And it happened at a leadership meeting. We started talking about this and she goes, I would love to collaborate with you. I said, well, let's make an accessibility sheet. So I met with her multiple times to say, show me your curriculum. What do you know about it so far? And then she gave me links and access because most of the time specialists can't get into those accounts. And, you know, just talk to her, show me your master OneNote that has all the stuff. And I end up putting a little accessibility icon into the master OneNote that said, hey, need accessibility tips. And so that the full version of that sheet I showed you, the screenshot, is embedded in the master OneNote. So any student in there who's struggling to access whatever it is can click and find out, or teacher can find out those tips.
That's amazing.
Now,
I'd love to see that to understand it better, how you linked everything technically, but I love that you've done that. I don't know how you found the time to do all the testing that you must have.
You know, you pick your projects. That's kind of how it goes there.
Yeah.
I'm going to put that accessibility document, a PDF of that, but into the folder that we shared with you. So that that link we gave you was to a folder, and we'll continue to add resources into that folder.
Okay, great. And then just riffing on this Amplify example too, common feedback I heard from teachers was that the text was not comprehensible. So that's, you know, understandable is the U in poor. And I know that that's when you might want to pair it with your other literacy support tools like Read and Write or WordQ.
So like the level needs to be maybe some of the language needs to be more understandable, or help give tools. You know, I've heard different reports. Some people want to level it down and other people want to say, well, are we giving students tools to learn some of these vocabulary words, or pre-teaching some of the vocabulary? So I think there's still lots of discussions out on that, but you're right. How do we make it, how do we modify it so they can use it if that's what they need?
Right.
Versus giving them something totally different.
Yeah. I just find that this is a tricky angle when trying to address accessibility. It's like hard to, it's not as clear cut as like use the styles the writing level. But maybe over time I'll share another tool I found to address clarity in writing. But I feel like I'm kind of stealing the mic right now. So
no, you're good. Got one more minute. I was just looking. Dan is blowing up the chat here with his thoughts.
Well, actually, Rose, can I interrupt you? Because Dan is actually responding to a question that was asked that I thought would be a great group. So thank you, Dan, for responding to that teacher, because I think this is not the only person who would have this question. And they said that their district has access to Snap and Read, but they don't think the students use it as often because as they could, because no one is responsible for teaching its use. Who do you recommend being responsible for teaching this tool so it can be beneficial for students? So that was the question. And then Dan's giving some great answers to that. So
I'm gonna read this too. Well, I think we can start dialogue now. It would be fine. I can open the PowerPoint if we need to look, but let's keep our just cameras on, or we'll keep our dialogue hat on here. What I did, okay, this is going back to my Kent career because I had Snap and Read in Kent. I worked, I actually had some FTE as part of the technology integration team with gen ed specialists. And I made sure they all knew about Snap and Read. I went to the meetings where they brought all the teacher librarians from all the schools together for these regular meetings. And I said, can I come to that meeting and show them all Snap and Read? They all went nuts about that. That was the one tool that I went district-wide with that Kent was most excited about because every teacher could relate to that and see a use for it. So what you have to do is get into those gen ed, digital learning or instructional technology, whatever they call them in your district, get into that group and make sure they know about these tools so that they can share them at the school level and help us teach them and get the word out on it. So that's where that collaboration is really important because you're right, we can't do it all. One person can't teach the whole district that tool. So it's kind of train the trainers and keep getting the word out there. Yay.
And then Dan's, sorry, I was just gonna say Dan's first response was great about you could actually be teaching the students and then reminding the students that when they're accessing electronic media, that they might use that tool. So, you know, that is one thing one teacher could do is get those students excited. And then, you know, and then just adding on to that, as those students go up to the next class year, they're going to spread out into different classrooms and they're going to be showing those teachers. So, and, you know, talking about that, you know, if you don't know how to pronounce a word, it's, you know, you could do that. So, so
I have two more ideas on that. Okay, so now I'm going to jump to my Bellevue time, the last 4 years. I collaborated, I hit it off with one of the, let's see what they call them, ITCL, Instructional Curriculum Technology Leader. So she was a tech person, but you know, in the building, in the library and doing tech. So she was all about learning and teaching all these accessibility tools. And I got her excited enough that we went in classrooms together and did lessons for the whole class on, in that case, we did Microsoft Immersive Reader. It could have been Snap and Read if that was district-wide. And we showed them, you know, some of those tools and got everyone in the class, whether they had it on their IEP or not, everyone got it. And they were all excited about trying it out and learning it and knowing, oh, and Dictate, just learning Microsoft Dictate. So anytime you can partner is good. And then she invited me to present. They had a technology parent night. It had a fancier title than that, but it was a middle school tech parent night. And I went and had a classroom and I had stuff set up with the accessibility tools. And so kids could try it out. I show and tell. And that was really fun too. And I got gen ed exposure. So everyone thought, oh, these are a tool for anyone. So thinking about how can you take these out of this silo they've been in, tools like Snap and Read, and make sure that everyone knows it's a UDL tool and it could be helpful for so many, but okay.
And then Kristen said, students can also teach each other. Peer support works well, especially for acceptance of tech tools.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to go back and follow up on Amy's original question. She was asking, when did that science curriculum add all that information? Because a couple of years ago, it wasn't there. And what that made me think about is, do go back and look at your curriculum. If you haven't done it in a few years, there has been a lot of accessibility features added to most programs, you know, so do go back and revisit if you think that you haven't seen it in a while.
And I made that document, the original one, in 2020, just to give you an idea, June of 2020. So it was there then. I don't know how much before then it was new, but yeah. All right. Awesome. So let's see if there's anything else we have to share with you here. And keep the questions coming. We're still discussing. Let's just look at these questions, or does anyone else have questions? You've already been asking them. Great job. How well do you implement accessibility in your own practice, but how about in your district? So we kind of reflected on personal practice, and then think about any other things. What it may not be a tip that you want to put into practice, but what do you want to take forward this week? What are you thinking about? What's kind of in your head that that you want to go dig into further. Or maybe one of these links, if you have a comment about anything you might have happened to look at. I don't know if there was really time for that. I apologize. We're supposed to have 15 minutes for that, but you know how that goes. So feel free to, again, put in the chat or unmic if you want to say anything else there.
Somebody's already said co-teaching with the instructional technology coaches.
Yes, I'm all over that. We have to get out of our silos. And they do get excited about it.
And somebody else put in the Padlet, accessibility checker in Word. Great.
Yes. Yeah, that's an easy one to use, and it's super powerful.
Mhm.
Okay. So we have another question. You don't have to answer it now, but think about it this week, because we're going to gather again next week, same time, same place, for session 2. Who can you contact in your district to discuss accessibility needs? So, you know, that's what we just talked about. Okay, maybe you want to talk to one of these instructional technology coaches. Maybe you want to talk to the reading curriculum developer about, or the science curriculum developer. You know, who is it in your world right now that it would be really important for you to connect with? And then we can talk more about that next week.